in Fields, like you were mentioning earlier, if Dalton and the Bears.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Matt Nagy came out and he did a Chris Collinsworth podcast, which, by the way, I like that podcast. I like Chris Collinsworth. He has a good conversation, has a good vibe. I feel like he has good connections, too, to get us conversations from the sports media world that nobody else will get. I appreciate Chris doing that. And I think Chris takes a lot of heat because he calls a lot of the big games. So somebody's going to think that he hates their team or player or something like that. That comes with that profession. But I like that podcast he does. He had Nagy on. I thought that was wild for Nagy to do the podcast because you don't really hear him talk much outside the press conference. He came out and alluded to the fact that basically Justin Fields not going to be the starter. Andy Dalton's still the starter. We like Justin Fields a lot. Obviously, we traded all the way up. So then yesterday, I think in a press conference, the reporter asked, hey, we listened to you talk there. Can we follow up about that? And he basically laid out their entire, viewpoint on it because when he brought in Andy Dalton, they told him he was the starter.
Yep.
They still had Nick Foles there who was paid as if he was a starter when he first went there, wasn't the starter, became the starter. They still stunk, and then he's still there getting paid, though. Andy Dalton comes out of Dallas 1 year from getting beheaded, basically, as a Dallas Cowboy quarterback, and then winning some games late. He's told he's a starter, he's a starter, he's a starter. Like 10 days later or whatever, they draft Justin Fields when they trade up, make a lot of moves to get there. This comes after the Russell Wilson trade conversation, allegedly, with the Bears. So it's a big, it seems like they're just grasping at straws almost for who's going to be their quarterback. Andy Dalton's going to be the starter, though, Matt Nagy proclaimed June 15th or 16th, either today or yesterday, he's going to be the starter. We have a plan. He said everybody likes Justin Fields. They're there. And if you're a Bears fan, I think you at least got to appreciate the conviction by Nagy being like, I don't care what any outside media outlet or anybody else is saying. This is our plan. The team needs to know Andy's going to be the starter. Will there be a turnover phase? Probably, but this is the whole go-to. And I like that because I think, when you have a competition in camp, it's never good. If a team doesn't know who the guy is, your team is not going to be together. Your team is naturally going to split, whether it's how old some people are, and in the locker room they might gravitate to that person. Maybe in the reps that they had, one particular quarterback is throwing a better ball, making a better decision, making some people's lives easier. Maybe one guy has more friends that are there that are older and more influential. You really don't want that in your locker room. I know places have had it. I know it does exist. I think the Bears said Mitch and Nick Foles are going to be a competition. As soon as that was said, I think we all said that's a bad idea because you're going to split the locker room. Maybe Nagy's just learning from that last year and saying, no, Andy's our guy. The team needs to know Andy's our guy. Fields is the backup. I think that's smart. I think they're learning their lesson through that entire thing after what happened last year where it was an abysmal failure. And I think Andy Dalton, if he has 1-2 bad games, it's going to get loud.
Yeah.
And I assume that's a part of Nagy's plan. But I like that he's not like, hey, this is a competition, because that can split the locker room immediately, which is the worst thing to happen to a team, especially in the NFL.
Well, and it's much easier for a team, like you said, during competition or during training camp for there to be a competition. But during the season, it's like, okay, if we're switching to this guy.
Training camp, even tough.
Yeah.
Training camp, the worst time to have a quarterback battle, because there's time in the training room where one guy might be with a group of guys. There's time at night in dorm rooms. There's different in the locker room. I just feel like at the quarterback position, you have to have a guy. Personally, I do, because everybody else has to know, like, okay, this is the guy. This is what our team's going to be like. He's setting the tone. He's doing this. Everybody on offense, I think it makes their lives a lot easier, because it's like, okay, I don't have to pick. I don't have to pick who I like, who's going to be better. Granted, I know competitions have to happen, and iron sharpens iron, everything like that. But at the quarterback position, I think if you don't, it helps out everything else. Now, if Andy Dalton struggles and they move Justin Fields in, the reps that Justin Fields has had in practice, I assume will earn the confidence of all his teammates. Like, hey, excited for your time to get in here. Okay. But I think during camp, you got to be like, hey, this is this guy's team. I just think you have to.
Even before that, like if he does, like if at camp it becomes abundantly clear, like, oh, okay, we have to play Justin Fields, do you think it'll ever even get to a point where that could happen? Or do you think this is just like, hey, this is the way it is, he's not going to start the season?
I think the reason why I was so big on it being June 15th, June 16th, him making his proclamation, is because what if they rewatch all the film here after everybody leaves and they're like, hey, we think Justin Fields is our guy. Maybe they haven't. I guess they probably already have, and they said he's not going to be the guy. This is after minicamps and OTAs and everything like that. But if before that camp you come out and say, hey, Justin Fields is – I want a team to name a starter, but to just immediately rule out the guy that you made a massive trade for on draft night. And also, your entire social media team is just promoting.
Yeah.
Your entire city is just promoting. I guess to come out early and say, hey, Andy Dalton is our starter, you're kind of putting Andy in an interesting situation, which Andy has been in a lot of interesting situations. But that's what Nagy's doing. I'll be excited to see how long the plan lasts, because everybody has a plan to get punched in the face. Everybody has a plan to get punched in the face.
Whatever his plan is, I mean, he's got 1 year to figure it out, so he better hope he's got the right plan picked.
I like that he's having some patience, though, even knowing that there's a chance he won't be around long term for the good of Justin Fields, maybe, as opposed to Justin or dropping him just in the middle of an absolute fire. What's up, Zeke?
Him not starting Justin Fields automatically gives him an extra year, right?
Now, that is a way you could think of him buying out of or pawning maybe responsibility off on. We got.
He's learning. He's learning.
He's learning. We had promise, more promise than we did the year before. You know, he's a guy. We got a guy. Now we build around the guy. Granted, we gave up some picks, so we're not going to be able to do it through that. Maybe an offseason, especially if the Bears are moving around town up there in Chicago.
Yeah,
they're getting up out of Soldier Field.
Heading up to Arlington Park.
They're moving out of Soldier. Allegedly, that's conversations that's happening with City Council. There's a lot of change happening. You don't want to have a change of a coach, too, with this young guy.
That mayor's a stooge.
Maybe that is what they're doing. Hey, whoa.